Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending this webinar sponsored by Accelerant. We have a very interesting panel discussion today that will be hosted by Liz Murphy, who is the CEO of CampusWorks. Before we begin with the session, what I would like to do is I would like to cover some housekeeping issues. All of you are in listen-only mode. On the right-hand side, you'll see a little question box and a dialog box. Please type any questions you have into that box, and we will try to answer those questions near the end of the webinar. And if we don't, then we will get back to you individually. This is not intended to be a commercial for Accelerant's budget pack product, but all of the panel members, or I should say not both, but three of the panel members from community colleges are organizations that use the budget pack product, but we've asked them to try not to turn this into a commercial for the product. If you are interested in anything you hear today, we'd be happy to follow up with you separately. So here is our outline in our agenda. I am going to tell you a little bit about who we are and what it is that we do. Then I'm going to introduce the panelists to you. Then we're going to do a panel discussion. Then we'll take your questions from that dialog box on the right-hand side, and then we will wrap up. So who is Accelerant? Accelerant is a cloud-based software company that builds and implements innovative, practical, and powerful budget preparation, forecasting, and management reporting software to energize a culture of budget accountability with your faculty and staff. We have a large number of higher education institutions who are customers. This is a partial list, and I've highlighted some of the ones in red who are community colleges, and that's the purpose of our webinar today, is talk about that. And of course, all three of the panelists mentioned are, their organizations are highlighted in red today. All right, so what I would like to do is I would like to introduce the panelists, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by introducing Liz Murphy, who is the CEO of CampusWorks. Welcome, Liz, and please tell us a little bit about your organization before we begin.
Thank you, Ted. Good afternoon, everyone. CampusWorks is an organization that had its roots 15 years ago in technology leadership services, and really we've transformed in the last 3 years to be an organization whose mission is to improve society by making higher education more accessible in general. And we do that by helping our clients to solve some of their most difficult problems, whether they are technology issues, aligning budget with strategic priorities and goals, figuring out how to get it done, helping them to get over accreditation hurdles after they may have had a rocky visit, or simply transforming their technology to something that's more contemporary. So our clients are in Canada and the United States, and we have a special interest and a specialty in the community college market, as that was our founding back in 1999.
Okay, great, thank you. Who are some of your community college customers? Could you just give us an example?
Sure. Navarro College in Texas, Middlesex Community College in Massachusetts, San Jose Evergreen Community College District in the West in California. Wow, we have about 40 community colleges that use our services on a regular basis. Keano College in Alberta, Canada, in the oil sands country. They're a very interesting institution. And all of these institutions really are facing different challenges and opportunities as they look at how to do more with less. And as they ask the question, are we really really optimizing what we own to our best advantage?
Okay, well, I'm going to turn the webinar over to you, and you can ask the panelists to introduce themselves.
Great, thank you so much. Let me first introduce you all to Stacey Buckingham. Stacy, will you introduce yourself to the rest of the group, please?
Sure. I'm Stacey Buckingham, the Dean for Financial Operations at Johnny Logan College. We're in Illinois, in the southern part of the state, and I've been at the college almost 25 years, but only been in this current role for about a little over 2 years, and have been through a couple budgeting cycles now and the implementation of the budgeting solution, the software.
Great. Donna Farlow is joining us from Union County College. Donna, would you introduce yourself to the group?
Yes. I'm the Director of Budgeting at Union County College. We are a 2-year community college with 4 campuses in the Union County of New Jersey, one of 19 community colleges in the state that were legislated into being. I'm a CPA and an MBA and CGMA. I've worked not just in higher education, but for a sole proprietor all the way up to a Fortune 500 company. I've been at the college for 12 years, where we use Aleutians Colleague for our ERP. We have an operating budget of about $70 million and 12 to 13,000 credit students, 50-50 full-time, part-time. And one of our biggest challenges is that we are required to have open admissions. There is no screening students and not accepting them. We must accept everyone.
Thank you, Donna. Steve Miller is joining us from San Juan College. Steve, would you introduce yourself to the group?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Steve Miller. I'm an assistant controller at San Juan College. It's a college in New Mexico in the Four Corners region of the state. I've been employed here at the college just short of 2 years, so relatively new to San Juan College. I do have 12-plus years experience in higher education at another institution. It was a 4-year school, not a community college, so I do have some other higher ed education or experience as well, and I guess that's about it.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Ted, should we dive right in?
Go ahead.
That's great. That's great. So your panelists are folks who have extensive experience both in the community college and in the budgeting process or processes that go on within higher ed, and those processes have become more complex. Perhaps better, more aptly said, it's not the process that's become complex; it's the balancing act that you all have to do as institutions, where as we enjoy more students coming to campus in times of very high unemployment with little more funding, and then how to balance the other direction when unemployment is rebounding as it is now and we have fewer students. That's really created a lot of challenges internally. And as we're preparing for this webinar, the panelists were sharing some interesting stories about how they're aligning strategy and budget and how that's impacting the process. So, Donna, would you kick us off and tell us a little bit about how the demands to align strategy and budget are impacting your budgeting process?
All right. It's requiring that the executives that put together the strategy first come up with a clear communication of what their goals are. And in the last 2 years, that goal thought process has been shifting with the requirement for measuring retention and graduation rates becoming the primary driver of all activities. In the past, it was how many credit hours can we get each year? How many classes can we offer? Let's increase our volume. Now it's focused more on the end product quality and how we go about aligning our resources to achieve those, help the students achieve those goals.
Steve, would you like to add to that?
Sure. Part of where we've seen issues with that kind of stuff is when we are, sending out the budget to the different departments and asking them to, put in their request for the budgets, how to find a system that they can then identify those strategic goals and, put numbers next to this is strategy 1, this aligns to the college's strategy 5.A, and really trying to figure out a way where that can all be recorded in an efficient way, so that it can link it back to that, because it's becoming more critical, it's probably for everybody, that you're making these decisions based on the true direction of the college and the strategies that you're trying to attain.
Do you have a regular reporting process that you use in order to keep those things on track?
And that's part of, I guess, our problem too, is trying to get that all put together. We're still trying to work through that. We have a budget committee that these things are supposed to go through and help to record that kind of stuff. But it's been a struggle for us, I'd say, here at San Juan, trying to, get that aligned and then also to get that communicated out to everybody, so that they're aware of why the decisions are being made. Because the community as a whole, as far as the campus goes, well, why did you cut my budget, or why did this area get, funding to do this? So in order to make sure that that is also communicated to everyone, so that they can see where that falls and how that aligns up with the direction.
That context is a very important thing, isn't it?
Yes.
For getting folks to get on board. Sometimes we focus a lot on the numbers, and we don't focus as much on the story. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but on the story behind why an institution has funded what they've decided to fund. Stacy had an interesting situation when John A. Logan implemented a new product, and what ended up happening was they were flooded with budget requests. Can you tell us about that, Stacy?
Yeah. Well, last year we just finished a new 5-year strategic plan, and what came out of that were a lot of, about 15 or 16 specific strategic projects that were identified and named, goals set. And we tried to ask our budget officers to, in the budget development process, to tie certain initiatives to those specific strategic projects. And they were able to do that somewhat through the solution, through the what's called action packs, and build those initiatives and those requests. What came out of that, though, there definitely were some requests for some new instructional programs that we didn't realize were, looming out there. But we did realize from those detailed requests that they were very heavy in equipment needs, startup equipment, biomedical type things. So the requests were pretty large, and we realized that we couldn't probably support that at this time, but, because we were also budgeting expected sources of revenue in the software. But, that might be an opportunity for us to say to that budget officer, have you worked at all with our grant development person to reach out, maybe see if there's grant opportunities where you could utilize that to help fund, a new program, the startup. And the other thing was in our IT department, our information technology, we realized we had a lot of need for a network upgrade, some of it being wireless, but a modernization of our network. We realized that we really couldn't fund those requests either, but that started a lot of discussion, and we were able to pursue a 5-year lease option, and to pursue getting support from our student senate and our student trustee and our board members to implement a new technology fee, a new student technology fee that we had not had in the past. So we were able to kind of isolate that network project and budget new revenue from a technology fee to move forward with that in combination with a lease agreement. So there was a lot of requests that started a lot of discussion, and things that came to light in the budgeting process this year.
Thanks, Stacy. I'm going to ask Joanne from Accelerant to put our first poll out there. We have 3 polling questions that we're going to run by the participants. So we really would appreciate it if you'd take a second to respond when you see the poll, and then we'll see how people, you'll be able to see on the screen what the responses are from all the participants. Interesting that you're all talking about sort of this pent-up demand, right, and need, and there's a lot of creativity that's absolutely critical today in figuring out how we get things done in higher ed. It was interesting some of you were probably at the Community College Business Officers Conference, CCBO, 2 years ago, and I will say I have repeated shamelessly this lesson that I learned from the CFO of Disney, the Disney company. And he said, I am not the chief financial officer of no, I am the chief financial officer of I can make that happen. And what a different perspective that is when you think about positively about all the demands that are being faced by institutions, and think about how could we come together, what could we call out of what's coming through in terms of requests, and how can we better align it with strategy to actually meet the need. Pretty interesting. So about 63% of you are working on aligning your strategic plan with the budget, and about, looks like 31% of you are there. So to those of you who are there, congratulations. For those of you who are working on it, it will be a work in progress for probably most of your careers. But as you could hear from the panelists, something that is definitely worth the time and energy, because it does create an opportunity for dialogue. So I'm going to ask the panelists, can you provide an illustration about how really knowing what is in the budget drove a decision that ended up saving you money? So an illustration of how really knowing what's in the budget drove a decision that ended up saving you money. Donna, do you have anything you could share with us?
Yes. In working with the instructional budget officers, those who actually are faculty members, we sat down and looked at their schedule for the year we were planning, how many sections were being offered. Then we said, well, if you have that many sections and you have 10 full-time faculty who can teach only so many courses a year, that means you have these many sections left. So let's look at how we're going to divide that up between overload and adjunct. And in doing that, we were able to reduce our overload adjunct variable wages by a good 20%. Where in the past, it was sort of just a number picked out of the air guessing, because nobody ever got down to the actual details of what was being offered and what was needed to support that offering.
It's amazing how many times we assume, right? We just say it'll be too expensive, or the program's really successful, but it's like legend and lore without the numbers. Steve, do you have an example?
Sure. It's not exactly an example of where we saved money, but it's a way that we are able to use budget money more effectively. And so previously, our adjunct budgeting money pool of funds was divided up at the department levels. And so and it was just, every year, well, yes, we need the same amount or we want more, but it really wasn't looking at whether that department really needed the budget for adjuncts, for example, or overloads. It was just based on like historical placement of how that funds were there. And so what we've been able to do here recently is we've now moved that out of the department levels and moved it up higher at the VP's level, and then they can dole it out according to actual need. And so it's very possible that we've seen it some happen already, where we're able to better utilize those funds where they're needed, and not have to say, well, okay, you're over budget, what's the deal? And then try and find, which area, didn't spend their money that they were thought they were going to because there wasn't the demand for the staffing. And so this way, it's a way to pull it all together and better utilize those funds where they are needed at the time, as opposed to just based on historical basis.
Really great point. Great point. Stacy.
Yes. We've had a lot of retirements in key positions the last couple of years. And we had the retirement of our Vice President of Instruction, which is a key role, reviews a lot of budget information across a lot of departments in the division. And so we had a new person coming in cold, not knowing our structure, not even being from Illinois. And, right off the bat, we hit her with, we've taken our tentative budget to the board, but we still have to take our final budget. We know we need additional review. We know we need additional adjustments. Our budget's too high. We've got to cut. And we need you to find us X amount of total dollars across your division to reduce it, so that we can take that to our budget hearing, report on what our changes are in our final budget. So we need you to do it. We need you to do it in about a week and a half. And we need you to give us the detail that we can track it and report it at the budget hearing, what those changes were from the tentative to the final. So we use the reporting tools in the budget solution to be able to give her all her unit departmental information in groupings. We said, here's your departments that report up through your Dean of Career and Technical Education. Here's your departments that report up through your Dean of Academic Affairs, your Dean of Institutional Effectiveness. Here's your direct reports. We've spit them all out of the budget solution in a PDF. You have the detailed line item descriptions. You've got the supplemental notes. You've got the historical comparison from the prior year's budget right beside it. You've got all your departmental names and the account structure within each department. So she was able to work in that time across numerous departments, come back with a list of about, I'd say, 25 to 30 changes, totaling probably, say, about $450,000 to $500,000 worth of adjustments in that short period of time. Give me a nice list of what departments were affected, what account codes, and the actual which line item request she was adjusting, so that I could use that to build that reporting back to the board and for the budget hearing. So that's an example, I think, of if we didn't have that detail and that reporting tool that was easy to use, there's no way she would have been able to jump in cold and go through all that, that structure.
That's fantastic. Great savings. Joanne, this is a good time to put the second poll question up, if you would, please. It's really interesting that the different tools that we have available to us, and it's very fascinating to me, having been on this side of the house, meaning the corporate side, of higher education now for 25 years. I started out working at a university and then a community college, but seeing so many different kinds of implementation of administrative solutions and how frustrating it is for management to not really be able to unearth what's happening in the budget process, or to use it, as you have all described, as sort of an illustrative tool. So many times I hear from the rank and file that they're worried about what's going to happen if their budget is very transparent to everyone else. The money they've got socked away is not going to be used for the programs that they've got. And that's really where sharing and communication becomes so important, and executive leadership to say, here's the direction we're going, and we can all get a lot more done if we're all aligned toward the same goals and direction. And while your project may not get funded this quarter, if it's aligned with the strategic plan, it's definitely going to get funded going forward. And also, how many times have we had real crises in terms of staffing that you couldn't see until you really looked at an analysis of what the cost is, what the revenue is, et cetera. So I'm a big advocate for driving more open book financial management within higher ed, all the way down to the staff level, if it's possible. So it looks like 72% of you are living in the Excel world for your budgeting efforts, and then a much smaller percent using what's in your ERP, and an even smaller percent using third party. I'm wondering if the panelists, I'm familiar with the products, that the ERP products you have, and I think most of you were using Excel at one point. Can you talk a little bit about what pushed you to go to a product outside the ERP or beyond Excel? Donna, let's start with you.
Okay, we were using Excel until a year and a half ago. I spent, I don't know, 3 to 5 months looking at our ERP budget module. I sat down with every budget officer and went through it, got their feelings about it, how comfortable they were working with it, and it was extremely obvious that nobody liked it. It was terrible for documenting, it was awkward to use, and the reporting out of it was just unavailable. About the same time, my vice president gave me 3 goals. He wanted me to improve the data collection and the ownership of the budgets being submitted. He wanted to reduce the errors from keying things over and over again, and to improve and spend more time on analysis and less on data entry for my own. The second thing he wanted me to be able to do was start drawing the budget officers into the forecasting process, the current estimate that we do every month for our board, where we're going to be at the end of the year, what's causing your spending to go up or down, so you understand the drivers of some of the shifting that's going on during the year. And the third goal was to be able to do multi-year financial planning, which right now we don't do, and there were no vehicles available for it. So with those 3 goals in mind, I started looking outside of our ERP and outside of Excel to find a better solution.
Do you find it difficult, Donna, to, I've heard many of our clients be concerned about the exchange of information between a third-party budgeting solution and their enterprise financial solution. How is that working for you?
Oh, it's extremely easy. I have a reporting tool that I use in the ERP to extract the actuals. I format it the way that the solution wants it, and in about 3 hours I can get all the data out, and there's a lot of data coming out of the ERP system, and load it into the solution, so I have an actual base in there, to bounce my budget preparations off of. And it works exactly the same going the other direction. I extract the data from the solution and import it into the ERP for the budget.
Wow.
It doesn't take any time at all. It's extremely easy. No rekeying at all.
I think that's music to the ears of every person who's on this webinar right now. Steve, tell us what drove you to an alternative solution. What were you using in terms of Excel or your ERP, and what were the deficiencies, the gaps you saw?
We were using Excel to do the budgeting process. We had looked at our ERP product and the budgeting component that they had. Same kind of thing that I think probably a lot of colleges run into. Your budget people that you're dealing with, they don't use your ERP system on a regular basis. So when they have to log into that system and try and, put together their budget, most time it's very cumbersome and it's not real user-friendly, and they don't use it on a day-to-day basis like a lot of us in, the business side of the house. We use it on a daily basis, so we've come used to it, and we know the quirks. We can navigate through it a lot easier than they can. So it's really difficult for them to use the ERP solution in a lot of cases. The thing that we had with ours was we looked at it, and they were also talking about doing an upgrade to the system and improving it. We hadn't been using it, and they suggested that we wait until this upgrade came through before, instead of starting with the earlier version and then trying to have to adjust to the changes that they were making, which made logical sense, but we didn't know what time frame that was really going to turn out to be. So we really needed something better than what we were using. Our ERP solution wasn't the best. Excel obviously wasn't the best. We still had the same kind of issues, how to track that. We send out Excel spreadsheets to all the budget monitors, who returns it, who doesn't. How do we track that to make sure that we've got everybody in the budget that we need to have in the budget and that we haven't missed some big piece of that? So we really were also having we had some personnel changes, and so it was one of those things too with, Excel and the formatting. Somebody else has been doing it, and it's sometimes hard for somebody new coming in to pick up what somebody else has created and try and move forward with that. So that was the decisions that kind of forced us into trying to find something else that would be a better solution that was user-friendly for the end users, and was able to give us all the information that we needed in order to compile the final budget and get it back into our ERP system.
Very helpful. Stacy, what was the impact culturally in the organization? I mean, how much time did it take for people to adjust to a new budget process?
Well, we've been kind of doing, actually the last 2 years, what I would call a modified version of zero-based budgeting. So we're looking for, in certain categories, say office supplies, we don't make them do zero-based budgeting. We're saying we'll give you a starting point, the lesser of last year's budget or actual expenditures from a prior year. And then if you have additional needs, you can make those requests. But we do some zero-based budgeting in other areas of like equipment, software, travel, a lot of areas. So a solution, we tried an Excel solution at first to have them filled in those justifications and that line item detail. And it was difficult at first with Excel because I'm working with about, I would say, 60 different budget officers across the campus and also some of their assistants, and trying to bring that historical data in from the prior years was difficult in Excel. I did it, but it wasn't, it was painful. And trying to flow those spreadsheets out to the budget officers and then move them up through the head of the division for approval and then back to me, trying to check for accuracy was difficult. Trying to make sure to lock down the spreadsheets where people didn't change your formulas and things was difficult. And there was no good reporting tool, like Donna said. But it took some initial training this past year. Of course, I was learning the solution at the same time. We had some people from the software company that helped us with some initial training. And I think a lot of our people really embraced it. They did a good job with the line item detail and the notes of what they were requesting. I think we can even build on that next year. We had a few that I'd like to see them put a little more detail into their individual departments next year. I'll do some follow-up training with those, with all the budget officers again. But I would definitely agree with what Donna said. When the final budget was done, the exporting out of the data was very easy, and it easily imported into our ERP system. And it's just a lot easier because the budget officers can go log in to the solution whenever they want to, and they can work on budget, they can set it aside, go back to it later. So, and hopefully next year, they should be able to import in some of that detail from the year before and make adjustments to it, add things, delete things they don't really need. It leaves a good trail of the requests from the year before.
That's a great point, too, in terms of not starting from a blank sheet, every year, too. I'm going to ask Joanne to put up the last poll question. And while she's doing that, I'd like to ask the panel, so when you think about how this information is being used for decision making, Donna, you told a pretty good story about something different that has happened in the organization. In general, has it caused people at the management level, beyond, below the executive team or your cabinet, to really ask more questions about the financial health of the organization? Do you think people's eyes are open wider because of the level of information you're able to provide now that you couldn't before?
I don't know that their eyes are open wider as much as I feel more comfortable being able to quote somebody's comments right out of their budget and say, according to the budget officer for the biology department, this is what's happening. And help them to understand if they make a decision, it's going to impact what he's doing. In that way, it's helping out.
Good. Steve, do you have an experience that you can share relevant to that?
I'm not sure if it's opened the eyes of the individual departmental budget officers. I think they are still kind of focusing on their individual departments, but I think the ones that have been able to gain from it and see more are then the people that they're reporting up through, whether it be at our dean's level or our vice president or president's level. They're the ones that are getting more information flowing to them about what's happening in their division, or what initiatives people are wanting to do. And it did allow, I know in particular, our vice president of what I would say are student services and community education was able to sit down with his individual budget managers and have some better discussion, I think, about their budget requests that were, sitting there in front of them, and kind of go through those requests together. So I think that's where it's probably helped the most.
So it looks like we have both hovering in the average. Nobody gave themselves a failing grade on financial reports informing decision making, and nobody gave themselves an A, gave their institution an A. Seems like C grade is about average, and that's pretty common. And actually, what we see in our work at CampusWorks is that there's a lot of what we call rear view mirror information coming through financial reporting in higher education. Higher education really hasn't, Donna mentioned that she's doing forecasting now, but many institutions are not. And when you can forecast, and I tell you this from personal experience, you can transform an organization because we really don't appreciate how long it takes for the organization to respond to change, to adapt to change. We say, higher ed responds slowly to change in general, but even if you're trying to course correct on a program that's not working or try to pull back on spending for something, typically those spending commitments have really long legs, if you will, and you end up losing several months just trying to back out of what you've been spending. And so the ability to forecast really gives you the opportunity to configure way ahead of time. And I think when I talk to CFOs, and particularly when I talk to presidents, and that's who I mostly spend my time with, they will say their number one issue is that all their reporting looks back, and very little of the reporting allows them to look forward and plan effectively. Steve, what would you say about the ability of having this budget information to really improve the kind of reporting at San Juan?
Something that we're really in a work in progress, but we see the great possibility of being able to do that forecasting to help us out to look long range. That's never really been done, so we're just budgeting 1 year to the next kind of thing, and it would be really nice, and we see some possibilities with our budgeting solutions and able to do that kind of thing, so that we can forecast a little bit, and and even pull multiple more than what we have in the past as far as reporting mid-year, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, to get information out to everybody that says here's where you're at, you've spent over 50% of your budget, and you're only 3 months into the year. Is that okay?
Right.
And it very well might be okay, but having people be able to see that kind of stuff, and even in the current budget year, in a better way that's presented in a more visual and simpler, user-friendly type of system, can be very valuable to them to know what's going on.
Great help. Ted, I'm wondering if you want to open it up to our participants for questions at this point.
I do, and the first question was a clarification. Somebody wanted to, and I'm not really sure exactly who mentioned this, but the question was around, can somebody who was explaining something about adjunct go back and talk about that a little bit more? Does that make sense?
I think that was Donna.
All right.
Okay. Well, if you have 100 sections being offered and you only have 1 full-time faculty in that area, that faculty member can only teach by, well, in our case, by contract, because they're unionized, 10 courses for their full-time salary in a year. Anything beyond 10 sections is paid to them by overload. They're limited to 2 in the fall and 2 in the spring for overload. So now they've taught 10, we've got 4 in overload. and we had how many sections to start with, whatever's left has to be taught by adjuncts, unless you're going to hire another full-time faculty member, which is a decision that you have to weigh based on finances. Did that help?
I guess that the answer to that is yes. The next question is more of a statement. The finance team can produce the reports, but getting the end users to read them is more difficult.
Amen.
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 All right.
I will say, and I actually thought I was interested to hear how you folks responded to the question about, sort of the training and the adaptability of your institutions, because typically we find that we need to educate folks on the basic information that's in a budget, what that information is used for, and how it all rolls up to the overall budget. And so we've conducted workshops for folks, for all the staff, particularly budget officers, of course, but then the managers who are feeding into budget officers so that they understand what they're being asked for. Does anybody on the panel have experience in doing that?
Well, in feeding, this is Donna, in introducing our budgeting solution to my budget officers, I took them carefully through a hour-and-a-half training session where the instructor walked through the process, one step at a time, demonstrating how it worked, what they needed to do. Then I took them on a scheduled basis to the lab and asked them to bring their current year budget details with them. And we took those budget details and carefully entered them into the budget solution so that at the time they were learning the software, they didn't have to be thinking about what am I going to need money for next year. All they were doing was learning how to use the software. And that seemed to work extremely well. Most of them then went off and did the next year's budget on their own without any assistance at all. I open up my lab 2 weeks every year during the budget cycle so that if anybody needs help, they can come to the lab and sit down with me if they're uncertain of what to do with the software.
That's great. It's a great amount of support for them.
I have a question here. It's a question I think we've already answered using a different context. Do any of you do mid-year budget adjustments? That's the forecasting process you were talking about, right, Liz?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The adjustment part, I think, becomes a question. Typically, adjustments in the community college are thrust upon you. Not voluntary, usually. But when you have to reforecast or you want to do sort of if-then analysis to say, okay, here's where we are, and the state or the locals are saying that, our budget's going to be cut by this much. What if we take this much out and reforecast? The other reason to forecast is to say enrollment isn't where we thought, so the dollars aren't coming in where we thought they were going to be. What does that do for us going forward? Constantly taking a fresh look at it. Typically, I recommend to clients that they don't reforecast their budget every month. That doesn't, pick one time during the year, usually as you approach mid-year, to say, okay, now we're reforecasting, and this is what we think the end of the year is going to look like. But always keep a projection. So we actually have budget, what we started with, what we're projecting, and then what the reforecast is as we move forward. Other folks on the panel want to talk about how they manage that.
I mean, we look at it from a month-to-month basis, where we're at, what percentage compared to budget, and where we're at compared to the same period for the prior fiscal year in both revenue and expenses. And we try to project out, where we're going to finish for the end of the fiscal year, and that could sometimes trigger our Vice President of Business Services to, alert the campus community about year-end spending habits, kind of what we're projecting or forecasting. So it could definitely alter our spending in the second half of the fiscal year or the last quarter.
Yep.
Next question. How are revenue projections handled, and are non-traditional sources encouraged?
Mm-hmm. Who would like to take that one? Well, this is Liz. Let me talk to you about what I see broadly working with community colleges, and that is absolutely non-traditional sources or creative solutions to revenue, kind of like the technology fee that Stacy was talking about, are definitely something to consider. John A. Logan and one of CampusWorks' other clients both implemented technology fees or implementing technology fees for the upcoming term, and they haven't had them before. And this goes to the point that, first of all, students are consuming more technology, whether it's just simply bandwidth. Their appetite for it is very great. So if you don't have a technology fee, it's becoming pretty easy, let me not understate, but pretty easy to make the case that it's worth it. But then you have to deliver on the performance, right? You've got to deliver on the network infrastructure. You've got to make sure that they can use their devices where they want to use their devices, et cetera, and that they have the self-service and the mobile apps that they're looking for and the technology in the classroom. So it's you end up making a contract with them whether you realize it or not, but that is a new source of funding, and certainly that would go into any projections, particularly if it became mid-year dollars that you might not have been expecting. Projections typically take into account everything you know about what your tuition revenues will be, what your expenses will be, are costs for adjuncts, let's go back to that, are costs for adjuncts higher than they've been in recent years, or are you actually running under budget? Have you been able to implement some changes or refine some course offerings so that those costs have actually come down? When you're budgeting, you don't always know all of those things at that particular moment in time. So the idea of a projection is to say, based on everything I know now and the pattern, not just 1 month's activity, what's the pattern I'm seeing? And when I see that pattern and extrapolate it out, what does the number then look like? And then plugging that into the budget and saying, okay, if that's what happens, then this is what it looks like. When you roll that up, you're actually able to see if projections are putting you in a position where you could possibly be overspending, or are you in a position where you actually have some discretionary dollars that you can put to some projects or initiatives that you didn't think you were going to be able to fund. That is really a habit that your senior leadership team really should get into, both the projections and the forecast, and then as they become comfortable with it, they push it down one more level, get that level comfortable with it, and it kind of keeps going down. And folks know that there's an opportunity. It also, our experience is that it really does help institutions, the individual staff, managers, budget officers, people who are spending money, to be very thoughtful about how they're spending. I worked in a community college in the days where you used it or you spent it or you lost it kind of thing, use or lose. And that created a very unhealthy environment, and it meant that departments who had not spent their dollars would be out there buying truly discretionary pieces of equipment and making investments in some other departments really didn't have the basics they needed to keep the program going. So,
great.
I'm sure none of that happens anymore. But
final question is a two-part question. Number one is, obviously this isn't free. How did you get this justified, and when is the right time of year to what is the right time of year? When is the right time of year to actually change the budget process?
Steve, why don't you talk about your story?
Okay. Yeah, as far as time goes, or the earlier the better for everybody's sanity. When we implemented the new solution a year ago, I would say we were late in the process of doing that, of making that switch from using an Excel spreadsheet budgeting process to a new solution. We had great support in doing that. We had the buy-in from our executive leadership team to switch as well, so that is very helpful. But the farther out, it worked for us ultimately, but it would have been good to have some more time to train the end user, to get them through the system, so that they had a little more time with it too, and it was a little more seamless as far as the process goes. The solution that we ended up with is cost-wise we thought was very affordable, and we were able to market it a little bit as far as efficiencies and sanity for the people that were putting together the budget to begin with, was going to be a huge factor in the cost, and hopefully with the efficiencies and not missing things and it all being more in one place, as far as a bunch of different Excel spreadsheets and different pages for that, it would be all together. So that was how we were able to kind of push it through to get the approvals for the cost. And timing-wise, we would have liked to have probably had a couple more months before we launched it. But
Stacy, do you have any?
Yeah, I would say this would definitely be the time of the year. If you're doing a new implementation, you do want to give it, I would say, 2 to 3 months, just because you have a lot of data to prepare to make sure it's consistent before it goes into the solution, and they're going to do a lot of work to build the solution for you, but you have to then make sure that it's, you have to do some testing, make sure it's accurate, do some training with end users. So, it is your data. We brought in 2 years of historical data, prior year budget, and a prior year's actual expenditure. It's your account structure. It's your departments, their departmental codes, their descriptions, their individual account object codes within those departments. You map to each unit the accounts that need to be there. So there is a certain building process. It won't be next year, it'll be cake, because the system's already built. It's our structure, and you can decide how you want your units grouped, how they flow up to the approvers for review. So you kind of do all that in the first year. So I would give, probably 3 months to do all that and to train, and then whatever your normal time is for budget officers to build their budgets and do the review and prepare your legal budgets and things like that after that. But, that's just the first year implementation thing, and it was pretty amazing. It forced me as a new dean to have to go through all my account structure from head to toe, see what any cleanup that needed to be done, because they have a good system for combing through your data, and if there's any duplication or any inconsistencies, they will find it. I can tell you that for sure.
Donna, do you want to tell your story on this point? Yeah.
Yeah. When I started this, I did two things. I put together a business case describing the problem and the opportunity, the solution and the vision, and the benefits and the cost. I also went over IT because they don't need to do a whole lot of anything other than make sure connectivity is working. And I held a webinar inviting key budget officers, including my Vice President of Finance, to watch a demonstration of the budget solution that I wanted to use. I asked them for their input to do an evaluation of it, and then I also asked our faculty budget officers to view an online demonstration of the software that was available to get their feedback on how comfortable they felt with it. And all of that together supported a more cohesive agreement that this was a good way to go, as opposed to what we had been doing with Excel and paper. And from a cost standpoint, it was extremely reasonable.
I failed to mention too, Liz, I also was able to tie it to one of our strategic projects in our strategic plan.
Oh, that's great.
For self-reporting and more departmental involvement in the budgeting process.
All right, folks, in the interest of time, incidentally, the person that asked a question about scenario management, the answer is yes. The product obviously handles scenario management as well. But in the interest of time, we've gone through the polls, we did the audience review, and we've answered your questions. So in terms of wrap up and next step, well, first of all, I wanted to thank the panelists. Liz, thank you so much. Stacy, Donna, Steve, thank you so much. I've noticed that we've had a strong attendance throughout the hour, so that's always a positive thing. And, should you change your budget process, this is a simple chart, but, it's one that we always tend to use. If you're happy with your system, then there's, keep doing what you're doing. If you're not happy, do you want to be happy? If the answer is no, then keep doing what you're doing. But if you want to be happy and you aren't happy, then you're going to have to change something. So here are some next steps for you. You can visit our website, www.accelerant.com. What we have done in the center of that page, if you click the gallery button, you'll see that we put together everything that we do for higher education on one page. We do have a blog. We tailored the blog to the higher education marketplace. There are about 7 or 8 or 9 higher education case studies on our website. A recorded version of this webinar will be available, but probably not for about a week or so. And obviously, we can sign you up for a free consultation. Panelists, do you have anything that you would like to add before we are wrapped? No?
When you implement a new solution, take it in baby steps. Don't try and do everything at once.
There you go. Thank you, Donna.
Great advice, Donna. Great advice.
I would say, too, if you're going for a student technology fee, get the support of your student body, your student senate, your student trustee, and then give them a voice on a technology committee of how that fee is used going forward.
Excellent point.
Steve, anything to add?
I think we're good.
All right. Well, again, thank you, panelists, and thank you for people who attended this webinar. We greatly appreciate it. And with that, we will bid you a pleasant afternoon. Thank you.